Your brain has been lying to you about how emotions work, not metaphorically, literally. Every emotion you experience runs on biological hardware installed millions of years before language existed. Today we're breaking down every major emotion with zero fluff, just the neuroscience, starting with the one that's kept you alive the longest. Fear. Fear is faster than you. That's not a metaphor. The amygdala can detect a threat and trigger a full-body response in roughly 12 milliseconds. A single blink takes about 300 milliseconds. You're already reacting before you have any conscious idea what you're reacting to. Here's how that works. Your brain runs two pathways simultaneously. The fast route shoots sensory data straight from the thalamus to the amygdala, completely bypassing the cortex. Zero thinking involved. Your body is already flooding with adrenaline, your heart rate is climbing, and blood flow has rerouted into your muscles. Meanwhile, the slow route finally sends that same information through the cortex for rational evaluation. By the time your conscious brain goes, oh, that's a stick, not a snake, your legs have already moved. Your body literally reacts before your brain can think. That's not a flaw. That's evolutionary insurance against predators that didn't wait for you to finish processing. Now here's where it gets complicated. Fear extinction, the process of learning something isn't actually dangerous, requires repeated exposures to the feared stimulus without anything bad happening. And the original fear memory doesn't get erased, it gets suppressed by new learning, which is why fears can return under stress. When that system breaks, so roughly 19% of American adults experience anxiety disorders annually, many rooted in fear responses that simply won't turn off. But if fear is your brain's oldest alarm system, anger is what happens when that alarm decides to fight back. Anger. Your body has a war mode, not a metaphor, not a figure of speech, an actual physiological state where your metabolism shifts into high-action combat readiness within seconds of being provoked. Testosterone spikes almost instantly. Your heart rate rockets to 140 to 170 beats per minute, which is comparable to sprinting uphill. Blood redirects, muscles prime, norepinephrine and adrenaline flood every system you've got. Cool. Great, your body's ready for a fight. There's just one small problem. The part of your brain that decides whether the fight is a good idea gets shut off. The prefrontal cortex, your rational decision-making center, shows significantly reduced activity during anger. That's not a subtle dip. Your body is screaming destroy something while the only part of you capable of saying maybe don't is basically on a lunch break. And it doesn't just snap back. The parasympathetic nervous system, your calm down response, stays suppressed for up to 20 minutes after the anger passes. You think you've cooled off. You haven't. You're still neurologically primed for confrontation, just quieter about it. Here's the kicker though. Everything people think helps with anger actually makes it worse. Punching pillows, screaming into the void, venting to a friend. The catharsis model is essentially a myth. Research shows that venting prolongs anger rather than relieving it. You're not releasing pressure, you're rehearsing the emotion. Chronic anger isn't just unpleasant either. It significantly increases cardiovascular disease risk and hypertension risk. A large percentage of people engage in aggressive fantasies when angry, though very few actually act on them, which is, reassuring in the way that a high survival rate is reassuring. But if anger is your body going to war, sadness is the exact opposite. It's your body forcing you to stop. Sadness. Your brain has an emergency brake. Sadness is what happens when it pulls it. Every other emotion speeds something up. Fear floods you with adrenaline. Anger jacks your heart rate up. Joy dumps dopamine like it's going out of style. Sadness does the opposite. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, slows your body down, and cuts your metabolic demands. Your body literally shifts into conservation mode. You don't want to move, you don't want to talk, you don't want to do anything. That's not weakness. That's engineering. Here's where things get interesting. Prolonged sadness is associated with reduced dopamine activity. That's your motivation chemical getting dialed down. At the same time, your default mode network goes hyperactive, cranking up rumination and self-referential thinking. So you can't move, can't get motivated, and your brain won't stop replaying whatever happened. Sounds like a design flaw, right? Turns out, no. It's enforced recovery. Your brain is forcing you to sit still, process what happened, and consolidate the memory so you don't repeat it. It's brutal, but it's functional. And the crying. That's not just emotional overflow. Tearful crying releases leucine and enkephalin, a natural painkiller, along with oxytocin and endorphins. You are literally medicating yourself. Emotional tears even have a different chemical composition than reflex tears. Your body has a built-in pharmacy, and sadness is the prescription. Now here's the part that surprised me. Research on emotion duration found that sadness episodes last dramatically longer than other emotions, averaging around 120 hours. Anger, about 60 minutes. Shame and fear, gone in under an hour. Sadness outlasts every other emotion by a staggering margin because recovery takes time. Evolution didn't design sadness to feel good, it designed sadness to keep you alive long enough to heal. Brief sadness isn't something to fix. It consolidates memory, deepens social bonds, and forces the processing your brain desperately needs. But if sadness is your brain pulling the emergency brake, joy is here's what happens when it floors the gas. Joy is not just a nice feeling. It's a full neurological recalibration event, and most people have zero idea what's actually happening when they experience it. When joy hits, your dopamine levels spike significantly. Your prefrontal cortex and ventral striatum light up well above normal activation levels. And these effects aren't just momentary flickers, your brain is literally running different software during joy. But here's the part that's genuinely fun. A real smile, a Duchenne smile, activates two specific muscles. The zygomaticus major pulls your mouth corners up, and the orbicularis oculi crinkles the skin around your eyes. Most people cannot voluntarily contract the orbicularis oculi the way it fires during genuine emotion, meaning most humans are physically incapable of faking a real smile. Your face is a snitch, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now here's where it gets interesting. Joy experienced alone is fine. Joy experienced with other people amplifies the effect considerably. Shared positive experiences trigger stronger neural reward responses than solitary ones. That's why watching a movie alone versus in a packed theater feels completely different. Your brain is literally rewarding you more for being social, which is, not ideal for introverts, and your brain doesn't even wait for the event. The dopamine system starts firing in anticipation well before a positive event happens. You're getting a neurochemical hit from Tuesday's concert on Saturday morning, but the real kicker is what joy does long term. Positive emotional experiences recalibrate your reward sensitivity, training your brain to notice smaller positive events over time. People who regularly experience positive emotions show meaningfully lower rates of depression. Joy isn't just pleasant, it's preventative medicine. Quick note though, forced happiness bypasses genuine emotional processing. Your brain knows the difference. Plastering on a grin does absolutely nothing for your neurochemistry. Turns out your brain can't be gaslit by your Instagram captions. But if joy makes your brain notice good things, the next emotion makes your brain recoil from bad ones. And it started with rotten meat. Disgust. Your brain treats rotten food and moral betrayal with the exact same hardware. That's not a metaphor. That's neuroscience. Disgust originates in the anterior insula, a brain region that also plays a key role in processing bodily awareness and aversion. When you encounter something disgusting, your vagus nerve triggers the gag reflex within milliseconds of sensory input. Your body's already rejecting the threat before your conscious mind has even formed an opinion about it. And originally, that's all disgust was: pathogen, defense. Don't eat that, it'll kill you. Your olfactory system contains around 400 receptor types, and disgust compounds get flagged almost instantly. Your nose is basically running a biological threat scanner at all times, which is, a lovely thought. But here's where it gets weird. Somewhere along the developmental timeline, disgust jumps categories. Younger children mostly show disgust toward physical contaminants, but by around age 7 or 8, kids start reliably expressing disgust at moral violations like cheating or cruelty. The emotion that evolved to keep you from eating contaminated meat got repurposed to police fairness, loyalty, and social norms. Your moral compass is literally running on food poisoning software, and the data backs this up. Moral disgust activates the insula in ways that overlap heavily with physical disgust in fMRI studies. Your brain processes someone betraying a friend's trust through the same neural architecture it uses for a plate of spoiled shrimp. Let that sink in. Here's the kicker. Disgust sensitivity actually correlates with your political ideology. Higher disgust sensitivity is consistently associated with more conservative attitudes, particularly around purity and tradition. Your gut reaction to something gross is quietly shaping how you see the world. The controversy over whether disgust should guide morality at all is a real debate in psychology, because the system making those calls was designed for a completely different job. But if disgust is your brain misapplying ancient software, wait until you see what happens when your brain's prediction engine breaks entirely. Surprise! This is the shortest emotion you have. It's also the one scientists can't stop arguing about, because there's a genuine debate over whether surprise is even a real emotion or just a cognitive glitch. Your brain runs when reality doesn't match the script. Here's what actually happens. Something unexpected occurs and your locus coeruleus fires within about 100 milliseconds. That's before you're consciously aware anything happened. Your body is already reacting to a world that changed before your mind even knows about it. The full surprise response peaks between 200 and 500 milliseconds. And during that window, your brain does something fascinating. It completely interrupts whatever you were thinking about, full stop. For a fraction of a second, your ongoing cognition just halts while your prefrontal cortex frantically resets its prediction models. Your brain is basically running a system update in real time. And during that tiny window, norepinephrine surges significantly. That flood of norepinephrine stamps whatever just happened directly into your memory banks. Surprising events get prioritized for memory encoding in ways that ordinary moments simply don't. This is is why you remember exactly where you were during shocking moments but can't recall what you had for lunch 3 days ago. Your brain decided lunch wasn't a prediction error worth filing. Here's the part that's genuinely interesting. Surprise only exists when reality violates your expectations. Nothing about an expected event surprises you, which means surprise is essentially a measurement of how well your brain models reality. Every time you're surprised, your brain is admitting it was wrong about something. It's a real-time error detection system, debugging your mental model of the world one prediction failure at a time. The ability to process surprise quickly would have been a genuine survival advantage in unpredictable environments, which makes sense. The faster you notice reality change, the faster you adapt. Not a bad system for something that might not even qualify as a real emotion. But if surprise measures how well you predict others, the next emotion determines whether you bother predicting them at all. Trust. There's a genuine debate over whether trust is even an emotion or just a decision strategy. Here's the thing. Neuroscience has gotten pretty close to settling this one. Trust has its own chemistry, its own autonomic signature, and its own reward pathway. It's not a calculation, it's a feeling. And it's running way more of your life than you think. Oxytocin is the molecule doing the heavy lifting here. When you administer oxytocin intranasally, financial trust in economic games increases significantly, sometimes more than doubling the amount of money people are willing to hand over to a stranger. That's not a subtle nudge. That's a chemical completely rewriting your risk tolerance toward another human being. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex shows heightened activation during trust decisions, and trusted individuals actually trigger dopamine release similar to receiving a direct reward. Your brain literally treats a trusted person the same way it treats getting something good. Trust is basically your brain running. Assume good intent code so it can shut down threat monitoring systems and save energy. People in high trust environments show measurably lower cortisol and reduced cardiovascular stress markers. Your body genuinely relaxes when surrounded by people it trusts. The whole system calms down. But here's where the math gets brutal. Rebuilding trust after a single violation requires many more positive interactions than it took to form it in the first place. One bad experience costs you over a dozen good ones. That's a horrific exchange rate. Your brain also creates genuine empathic distance from people you distrust, dampening the mirroring responses that normally let you feel what someone else feels. You literally stop resonating with them, which is not ideal for any relationship trying to rebuild. Trust forms fast too. Your amygdala makes a snap judgment within roughly 33 to 100 milliseconds of seeing someone's face. Then, the slower prefrontal deliberation kicks in to either confirm or to override that gut read. So your brain decides whether to trust someone before you've even finished looking at them, and then spends the next fraction of a second trying to justify the decision it already made. But if trust is your brain's way of conserving energy on people it already knows, anticipation is what happens when it starts spending energy on things that haven't even happened yet. Anticipation. Here's something that's going to annoy you. The best part of your vacation? It wasn't the vacation, it was the weeks before it. Your brain literally enjoys the waiting more than the thing it's waiting for, and I can prove it. Anticipation works through dopamine signaling in your brain's reward circuitry. When you get cues that something good is coming, dopamine starts flowing, proportional to how big the reward is and how uncertain the timing feels. But here's the kicker. That dopamine activity is strongest during the anticipation phase itself, not during the reward before it, and it gets more counterintuitive from there. People who had a vacation planned reported higher levels of happiness in the weeks leading up to it, peaking in the pre-trip period. So the person who books a trip well in advance is getting more total happiness than the person who books last minute. The wait is not a cost, it's the product. This is why humans consistently savor future experiences more than past ones. Your brain cares more about predictions than outcomes. It's running a simulation of how good something will be, and that simulation is, neurologically speaking, often more rewarding than the real thing, which is, not ideal for anyone hoping reality would be enough. But here's where it gets dark. Negative anticipation, the kind we call anxiety, runs on overlapping hardware. The brain's threat detection system hijacks that same future-oriented machinery and flips the whole experience from "this is going to be amazing" to "something terrible is coming." Chronic anticipatory anxiety maintains elevated cortisol and is associated with a significantly increased risk of developing depression. The system that makes Christmas exciting is the same system that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., convinced everything is falling apart. Your brain built one machine for thinking about the future. It just forgot to install separate controls for good futures and bad ones. And if anticipation can quietly rewire your well-being in both directions, wait until you see what happens when the threat isn't future, it's you. That's where shame comes in. Shame Shame is neurological sabotage. There's no nicer way to put it. Your brain activates the anterior insula and medial prefrontal cortex with significantly greater intensity than embarrassment, which sounds like a minor upgrade, until you realize what it does next. It suppresses your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex activity. That's your executive function. Your higher order thinking gets disrupted while your threat detection systems simultaneously spike to full alert. So you're thinking less clearly and more hyper-vigilant at the exact same time, which is, not ideal, and your body sells you out immediately. Face flushing, eyes hitting the floor, shoulders curling inward, the whole body contracting. Every single one of those is an involuntary signal of social subordination. You're not choosing to look small. Your nervous system is doing it for you. Here's where the distinction matters. Guilt and shame sound like the same thing, but psychologically and neurologically, they're different animals. Guilt targets behavior. I did something bad. It engages prefrontal regions associated with perspective taking and repair motivation, and it pushes you to fix the problem. Shame targets identity. I am bad. It activates regions linked to self-referential distress, lingers far longer, and motivates you to hide. Guilt says repair. Shame says disappear. But here's the kicker. Early childhood shame experiences, particularly during those critical developmental years between ages 2 and 5, predict adult shame proneness. Children who get shamed for normal developmental mistakes, things every kid does, develop significantly higher shame sensitivity that can persist for the rest of their lives. Their entire emotional calibration gets warped before they can even read. Chronic shame is strongly associated with elevated risk of depression and anxiety disorders. So every shame-based punishment system, whether it's parenting or criminal justice, is neurologically counterproductive. You're disabling someone's ability to think clearly and then asking them to learn from the experience. Turns out, no, that's not how brains work. But if shame makes you want to disappear, the next emotion makes you want someone else to. Contempt. Every other emotion on this list has a job. Fear protects you, anger mobilizes you, even shame tries to keep you inside the group. Contempt doesn't want to keep anyone anywhere. Contempt wants to look at another human being and declare them beneath consideration. Contempt is the only emotion that fuses disgust and superiority into a single response. Your insula fires like you've encountered something contaminated, while your sympathetic arousal stays notably lower than during standard anger. Think about what that means. Anger gives you energy to confront a threat. Contempt pulls back because your brain has already decided the other person isn't worth the effort. You're not fighting them. You're dismissing them. Your neurology is running divorce proceedings before you've even opened your mouth. And it shows on your face in a way nothing else does. Contempt produces a unilateral lip corner raise, one side of the mouth curling up. It's the only asymmetrical primary emotion expression humans make. Every culture on Earth can spot it, which is, not ideal for something most people think they're hiding. But here's where it gets genuinely devastating. John Gottman tracked couples over decades and found that contempt was the single strongest predictor of divorce. Not anger, not criticism, not defensiveness, contempt alone. That's not a red flag. That's a death certificate with a future date on it. And the worst part is contempt lies to you while it does it. People experiencing contempt consistently perceive a larger moral gap between themselves and their target than actually exists. You feel like your judgment is objective. But it's a perceptual illusion dressed in the clothing of moral clarity. You're not being rational, you're being contemptuous. And your brain genuinely cannot tell the difference. Evolutionarily, contempt enforced social hierarchy. Anger says, I disagree with you. Contempt says, you don't matter. Every social structure humans have ever built has treated that distinction as the line between conflict and exile. It's the one emotion that treats another person as less than human, and it does it so smoothly that the person feeling it thinks they're the reasonable one. Not all emotions have a villain, but if they did, this one would be sitting alone at the top, completely convinced it belonged there. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.